So I'm really thrilled to be joined by Sara Andersen, the head of workplace effectiveness and real estate at Genentech. Sara, thanks so much for sitting down with me today.
Thank you. This is interesting. Looking forward to the conversation.
So I always like to start with just kind of how you first got interested in real estate and workplace effectiveness. So how did you end up where you are now?
So I am an architect by education and training and licensure. But early in my career, I was fortunate enough to work for an interior design company, and I started as a temp. And I was like, I don't. They're like, hey, your background looks good. Want to hire you? I was like, yeah, I don't know interior design. And and what I realized pretty quickly is it's architecture on speed. But there's a lot of great accountability to it. Whereas architecture very often is done by a committee that disbands when the project is finished. Whereas corporate workplace is you sit down with a leadership team and what are you trying to accomplish, and you guys check in all along the way. At the end, it's like, okay, we've completed this. Did we help? And so really, that idea about using real estate and workplace to help business achieve what it's trying to achieve, that's what got me into this.
And that's what's really interesting. What I wanted to get to right off the top is that I think real estate and workplace effectiveness kind of seem unrelated on the surface. So can you talk a little bit about what you're responsible with each title and kind of how they relate to one another?
Sure. Real estate is, what is our footprint? So we are 200 plus acres in South San Francisco. We have some other lease facilities in the U.S. Genentech is the U.S. Headquarters of Roche. But our presence in South San Francisco is our most significant presence. So the real estate side of things is making sure that we are doing what we need for the business. So we are, do we need a new manufacturing facility? Let's make sure that we have what we need, not just we have the land. Okay, great. But we now have to get it entitled with the city, et cetera. So we need to make sure we have a master zoning plan with the city of South San Francisco, which gives us development rights. And we also have, so basically we're entitled to build a lot more square footage than we currently have, which gives us a lot of flexibility. We need new labs, we need new manufacturing, et cetera. So that's the real estate side of the house, sort of the strategy on how you do that. And then the workplace is, what is each business unit? We are the only fully integrated site within Roche. So we go all the way from molecular discovery to commercial manufacturing for now. And so we have discrete business units that handle the different parts. And we have teams that work with them. What are you trying to achieve as a business in the next year, 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years? We're actually doing something more like longer term now as well. And what do we need to do from a real estate and workplace point of view to get you there? For example, there was a point in time where our product development function and our R&D function, R&D is doing early stage research, product development is doing late stage research. How do we break down those barriers? Well, it'd be great if we could be co-located. Well, we don't, where the R&D is anchored by labs. It's place-based work. Whereas product development has more flexibility. Well, I guess we need to build another building down where the labs are so that you guys can all be co-located and you can break down those silos between the early stage and late stage. If that makes sense.
Totally. And I think that's the really interesting thing with kind of what a diverse real estate footprint Genentech has. And kind of as you're going through establishing prospects, or excuse me, I'll start that over, Josh. Uh-huh. When you're going through kind of approaching your workplace effectiveness and trying to make improvements organizationally, how are you working between teams? What does it take to kind of make sure that everybody's needs are being fulfilled, especially from a physical space aspect when you're talking about really diverse needs across teams?
It takes, I'm not going to say negotiation. I would say like really good human skills. Are we aligned? What are we trying to achieve? When you talk about what we're trying to achieve as a business, it allows us to objectify the process. Less about, well, I want to be on the top floor because the views are better. What are we trying to achieve as a business? And I love what our company does. I feel I have the luxury of working for a company that saves lives. And it's actually really wonderful because it's very easy to reconnect people to the mission. Um, for example, years ago, I received a ping from an administrative assistant. She said, "Yeah, we wanted my VP needs a sit stand in her office, and um, it was rejected by your team." I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Okay, do you mind if I speak with the VP?" No, no problem. Well, it turns out the VP had just joined us from a tech company where they didn't have assigned offices. She didn't love being in an office, and I said, okay. And the reason we said no was because it was your admin was looking at a very customized situation, and we try not to customize because we spend $3 to $5 million a year customizing offices, and then when you move to another role, we'll spend another $3 to $5 million a year that year putting it back to standard. $5 million funds 1 to 2 clinical trials. How do we want to spend that money? And she's like, I am so with you. So not only am I like, we can go to the standard, but also, frankly, can you come speak to my entire staff and just give them that stat? I was like, yeah, no problem. So I recognize that that's it's a gift that we are so mission driven that we can connect people to the mission and make sure we're spending funds wisely.
So I think that's really interesting. I think that's a beautiful anecdote to kind of tie in your workplace effectiveness and head of real estate and how those things really merge together. So when you all were kind of working through the pandemic and working through reevaluating your real estate footprint and using it wisely and bringing people back into the office, what did you find effective in kind of establishing the processes of making the workplace use more effective, trying to incentivize bringing people back in? Let's like start with the beginning and get into the process that you went through with Genentech.
Sure. Well, to go back to the beginning, we have been sharing, and some of us have been sharing in our work environments since 2014. So we have a program called Neighborhood Work Environments that was opt-in. So a business leader would say, I want us to be working differently, and we would meet with them. And it's very similar to activity-based work. And then what happened over the years is more people opted in. We ended up with, in the neighborhood work environments, because they are shared, it depends on individual variability of schedule, and there are working flexibly agreements. We agree you can work up to X many days a week somewhere else. But by end of 2017, we're sort of like, okay, now we sort of have a have and have not situation. Those who work in neighborhoods can work flexibly, and those who don't can't. So we adopted a working flexibly philosophy for the whole company early in 2018, but it was probably a little more sporadically adopted because you definitely had managers who wanted to manage by FaceTime. And so when we had to go into shelter in place, first of all, our manufacturing teams never left. So all of a sudden we need to be sure we're supporting them with safe work environments, social distancing, masking while you're on the manufacturing floor. Not all tasks allow for that. So really have a great deal of respect for our business continuity teams. They kept everything going. We kept making the drugs. And then, but for those who had, so flipping the switch to working from home was easier for us than maybe some others who were less familiar with it. But then we also had the pressure of, we've got to get our scientists back, and how do we bring our scientists back safely? So I would say that for the majority of the end of 2020, all of 2021, we were really very focused on the changing environmental conditions and keeping those who needed to be on campus safe. But we also recognized early days, I want to say it was April of 2020. We're like, not everybody can work from home successfully. You maybe have a lot of roommates. You maybe have multiple kids, whatever it is, and so we had a leased facility about 10 minutes away from campus that already had shared work environment. So we opened that up as a drop-in for those who needed it. And that was really helpful for a lot of people. And we were able to sort of keep those who didn't have to be on campus away from those who had to be on campus, because it was really all about safety. And then we started looking in May of 2021. We opened up a voluntary return to campus, and our executive committee was the first group to come. And we did one building that was shared. And we did it for two reasons. One, it was a large facility that was all shared. And two, we wanted everybody who's returning voluntarily to be in the same place to create some buzz, right? And then we had our return to campus in March of 22. The other thing that was interesting is we started talking with the executive committee about what does the future of working really look like? And this conversation started April 2020. So we spent all of 21 developing future of working agreements with every functional group, the where, when, and how you do your work. And, and what are all the different work options available to you? Are you full-time campus? Are you, and it's, when I say you, is your role a full-time campus role? Is your role a role that could be episodic remote, like a couple days a week? Is your role something that's eligible for, I'm forgetting the word for it now, but, can you be remote for up to 4 weeks at a time with agreement? Can you job share? So we were trying to be really explicit, because we've always had agreements around how you operate in a shared work environment, how you want to operate as a team, but really making it much more explicit about the where, when, and how, and what roles are eligible for what. But we did all that while a lot of us were home. So in March 22, we started coming back, and we're like, not a lot of people are here. And even though we called it episodic remote, meaning campus first, and that's what it's called. It's called ad hoc remote is what we do the 2 or 3 days. Episodic is that 4 weeks at a time. So ad hoc remote, but people started treating it as ad hoc campus. So why should I go to campus versus campus is the default? So, growing pains, we're getting better. Revisiting our agreements. We agree that we want you on campus the majority of your time. You as a business unit can determine whether majority is per month, is per week. We as the site, you are majority of your time, which is 3 days, you will be on site. And then some groups have a very good practice of anchor days, so you are making sure that you're seeing the people you want to see.
Sure. I think the agreements aspect is particularly interesting to me, and I want to delve into that a little bit on what was the balance on that when you all are establishing these agreements between, where you're sitting in the office and saying, not a lot of people here,
Yeah.
and then turning and saying, what data do we have around this? How do we know who's coming in? And then how are we informing these policies to make sure that we can maintain a safe environment? And so let's talk about the balance between kind of the anecdotal gut feel and the data that you all are collecting, and
awesome.
How those decisions were being made.
Love to. Just quickly, I will talk about, the safety component. We implemented a while back something we call GCAS, the COVID something score. And it was a tiered program. California had something similar to that, actually, like, are you in red, are you in purple, et cetera. So what it allowed us to do is cluster behaviors. While we're in the yellow tier, we recommend you wear masks in meetings. We have a testing protocol, all that. So we have made campus is data proven. Campus is safer than the surrounding environment, including our commuting buses, et cetera. So we felt good about the safety. And, as things would get better and then worse, we had to have something to say, okay, great, we're in green. That means you don't have to mask. You always can. It's your choice, but you don't have to. And we had, we required vaccination. So we have a highly vaccinated, boosted population that is testing twice a week on rapid antigen tests. So when you're here, the population among like your coworkers, it's safe. So, so we have these agreements, and some groups even go, including ours, even go down to this is what we put in chat, this is what we put in email. Email we expect a response within 48 hours, even if it's just to say I've seen it, I'll get back to you. Chat's more urgent, 2 hours. If it's a chat room is a social chat room, let's put a hashtag in front of it or whatever it is so that you can titrate your notifications. Not everybody wants to be like, oh, you really, okay, yeah, happy birthday, Brandon, 16 times, right? So, and I love Brandon, but, how are our agreements working? We did do a survey that we issued in October, and we have badge data and sensor data. So we have sensors in all of our shared environments, which includes conference rooms in traditional buildings. So we know where people are showing up, where they're not. And then the good thing is we're able to take those sensors and turn it. We have an app that you can access what tier are we in, what cafeterias are nearby, what is the commuting options, but also you can go to a building and look at a floor plan and see what's available too. So you can also have something called team presence. So I can look on that app and see who's in. And so we also indicate presence on our calendars. So so now we've got the data and we have our agreements, and now we have the survey. So our teams who are business unit aligned are meeting with the leaders and saying, okay, here's what we're seeing. We're seeing this kind of show up rate. We're seeing it's typically these days. Your survey data shows people are happy, but they're missing all the stuff they got to do when they were home. They're missing getting the laundry done. They're missing getting those things. So it led us to develop some new services. There's now a dinner to go thing. You can pick up like a grab and go dinner. And how do we try to make being on campus as convenient as possible, because we want our people together.
As you've gone through the process, what would you say has been your biggest learning? If you could go back and start this over again, or if you wouldn't change anything at all,
Yeah.
So then maybe not even your biggest. Maybe we rank a couple of them.
Yeah, well, hindsight's 2020, right?
Sure.
I think what we would do differently is be more explicit about ad hoc remote is exactly that. It is campus is our default. We are remote, ad hoc, which is as needed. Right? The other thing that I think we'd be more explicit about is what do we want to accomplish? Like what tasks are better served on campus and what tasks are better served at home. And I think we would probably develop some exercises for teams, because our future of working program is sponsored by our people in culture, our HR group, but it is facilitated by the workplace effectiveness group. They basically are the ones doing all the meetings and probably have a little bit more of what do we want to do when we get together. Like, for example, a colleague of mine in IT, he was like, for us, come in Tuesday morning, do a hackathon, eat lunch together, individual work in the afternoon, but parallel work. So I can just grab you and be like, hey, Joe, sorry, can we just like whiteboard this? And so it's actually super productive time together. And then Wednesday we'll do a readout at the hackathon. Wednesday afternoon, whatever. Like, so they actually think through what they're trying to accomplish together. So I think we probably would try and do a little bit more of that. Now, frankly, doing that while a lot of people were working flexibly or working from home was really hard because no one knew what it was going to feel like. Not surprisingly, I was one of the early adopters of the voluntary return. And it took a little while. Like, okay, did I remember my badge? I remember my water bottle. Did I remember my mask? Like all those things. But I thought it was super interesting because you'd hear this. I called it the COVID squeal. Two people who hadn't seen each other in person in 2 years. Like, oh my God, I was so good. And yep. It felt really good. So I think it's that's something that we would try and do differently, is be more purposeful about ad hoc remote. Is that campus is our default. We come together with purpose.
Sure, sure. And I think it's interesting too, especially with your role, kind of the interplay with real estate and with what the workplace looks like, and how everybody's being most effective. And this varies. So I really want your direct insight on this. Is how would you say, when you're defining that the real estate footprint? Maybe it's let's do it this way. You have the workplace efficiency on one side, the real estate on the other, and what makes both of these things successful? When you would say defining success in the middle of that Venn diagram, how
Yeah.
would you define that?
Okay. Well, one thing I want to clarify: we think about workplace effectiveness, not efficiency.
Sure. Pardon me.
I
Yeah.
mean, no, it's okay, but it's
Yeah.
important because in all of our conversations about why do we want people to come together on campus, never has the utilization of our real estate been a focus at all. Not that want to be like um, irresponsible with it or anything like that, but like uh, our head of R&D said something really impactful, I felt, which is a lot of us at home felt like we were being really productive. And we talk about that a lot as an industry, how productive we've all been at home. So when we are working from home, are we productive because we have a list of things that we want to accomplish and we get everything done on that list? Is that productive or is that efficient? Right. And efficiency has no place in innovation. That's what she talked about, which I just loved. And something else I think that you're probably familiar with the theory of weak ties and strong ties, and that during work from home period, we're working with a lot of the same people. Those are our strong ties. Our strong ties got stronger. The majority of our weak ties withered, and innovation comes from our weak ties and diversity of thought. So that's why we want to be together. And I can't speak in an eloquent manner about how our R&D process happens, but it thrives on the challenging of ideas, the defense, the open-mindedness to shift on your thinking. And so that's why we really want to make sure we focus on that. So it talks about, our real estate in our workplace. How do we make sure that there's buzz? How do we make sure that we're getting enough mass? What's it like, enough presence that you got some buzzy feel? You want people to feel like, frankly, it was a positive experience coming to campus today. We want people to have experiences when they come to campus that they can't have at home. Lunch with colleagues, seeing people, a spark, a new idea. And then in terms of real estate, we're doubling down on our place-based work. We need to build new labs. And we just completed during the pandemic a new manufacturing facility. We are building new labs. And in terms of our workplace and office portfolio, we are in a sort of experimental mode. We're going to start working with teams. What do you want to see? No one really knows. I know. So it's sort of like, okay, we can build an innovation space. What's that look like? What do you want to accomplish in your said innovation space? Anything we can do with furniture, we can do it. It's, so.
Yeah, really interesting. What do you think is something that most organizations get wrong about approaching making their workplace more effective?
I think the connection to the business and the
Sure.
co-creation with the business. It's a very large industry, manufacturing furniture for offices. And this, if you want your people to come back, you need to have this, whatever this is. And actually, a friend of mine's like, don't ever use the word resi-mercial, which, like feels residential, but it's also kind of commercial. And if you saw how the light changed, that's because nobody has walked by this hallway. So the lights have turned off. Come on. I think everyone's taking the 49ers loss pretty hard. They didn't come in. So
It's the Monday effect.
Yeah, actually, Mondays are okay here usually, but I'm wondering, there might be a Niners thing. Not kidding. So I think let me give you an example. 2000 end of 2016, we go to meet with the business unit. They are a fantastic group. If anyone has prescribed our medicine, they reach out to them, make sure that they understand how to get the medicine. Do you know how to navigate your insurance? Do you know how to do you have the appropriate insurance, etc.? But their work practices are those of a call center, the contact center. So we talked about, okay, you're in a lease facility. Your lease is up in 2019. Are you planning on staying in South San Francisco just because we want to make sure we're providing with the right facility? And they said, actually, this is really interesting. We're glad you're talking to us about this because we don't have business continuity set up. And if we have an earthquake or something and our people can't work, 3,400 patients a day won't get their medicines. Like, okay, let's figure this out. We need to give you business continuity. All right, so we're going to look for a second site for you, but how do you feel? This is what we did in 2017 about doing a remote working pilot. And because of their work practices, they had to be kind of prescriptive. You must have received, a valuable contribution or higher on your review. You need to be a full-time employee. You can't have small children or dogs. You need to have because you're on the phone with patients and providers, you need to have Wi-Fi at this, speed. And they helped you get that all set up. And so they started this remote working pilot, which gave them immediate business continuity because they were distributed. And the results, because you can measure contact center results. You can't measure other things. So I want to be really clear about that. We always talk about measuring productivity, and it's like, this is a little tricky. But call volume up by 20%. So basically, productivity up by 20%. They were the first to raise their hands for overtime. So it was very effective. But meanwhile, we also found them a spot in Portland. So they have business continuity, South San Francisco and a Portland site. They say two cities, one mission. And they had a really lovely graphic of the Golden Gate Bridge meeting a bridge in Portland. Anyway, so so it was using real estate and workplace effectiveness to help them achieve their desired business outcome of business continuity.
No, that's excellent. Thanks. That's an excellent example. I appreciate
It's
the
my
anecdote.
favorite.
Yeah, it's great.
I have to go on. Well, the best day of my career was when I was up in Portland where they were doing their soft launch, and this gentleman I've been working with, I saw him, like, how's it going? You enjoying being up here? He was like, yeah, my wife moved up here too. I was like, oh, I didn't realize you both worked for Genentech, let alone both worked for this group. He was like, yes. And we bought a house. And turns out like a half dozen Genentech employees had bought houses on this cul-de-sac in a place called Happy Valley. I can't even make that up. She came in the next day and she was carrying that plastic bag that had the garage door opener and the house keys. And I was just so proud because here these people are making a difference in the lives of our patients. And we were able to do something to help them. And frankly, we do a fair bit of training in our shared work environments around just collaboration tools like Google Docs, etc. Like, it seems small. Well, since they all were new homeowners, they established a Google Doc. I've got a 6-foot ladder. Joe's got a leaf blower. Cassie has got a hedge trimmer. So they established a Google Doc so they understood their joint inventory of new house stuff.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I love it. And being able to bring that together, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's good.
What would you say, and you just touched on this a little bit, what about one tool that you use day in and day out that you absolutely couldn't work without?
Since I'm gonna go to that path, I'm gonna do a shout out to Google. And we actually call it our collaborative suite, or it's not just Google. We also use Smart Sheets. We use Trello. I would say that's something that really grew during COVID was, or the work from home period, was the collaboration tools, and how do we become more effective. Um, we have also a whole thing about meeting effectiveness. Why do we meet? We don't meet to inform each other. That's a waste of time. Informs can happen offline. Have agendas for me, like all those little sort of best practices. But I will say I don't whiteboard nearly as much as I did pre-pandemic, and I miss it because you have to organize. We would do these working sessions, and we'd all be in a team room. We whiteboard out all sorts of scenarios. Um, and I actually am about to request the person who runs our scenario planning to start doing those working sessions in person again. Because what's happening now is a lot of the idea generation is happening, and then she's getting feedback on that. But it'd be better if it was bi-directional versus one person talking at a time. Talk about relationships. If you're always texting, we're not having a conversation.
Totally. So I think you just touched on something really interesting there that is something that on our end we observe quite a bit, and it's actually become kind of a focus of ours, is that a lot of industries have really rapidly adopted digital transformation and focused on how they can work more effectively. And it's been well intentioned, but you've got tons of different apps. It's kind of created like a fragmented feel. So it's obvious that that's something that you're experiencing as well. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you approach? I mean, you just touched on it a little bit, but do you think that bringing people back into the office is the most effective approach at kind of driving the business outcomes and wrapping your arms around that fragmentation, or do you think
I
there's
think
multiple
it's
ways?
both and. I
Sure.
think it's really being clear. Like we have somebody on our team, he's really gifted, a very gifted facilitator. He's we really questions a lot of things like why are we doing this? How can we do things better? And he is constantly reading and learning. And so he was talking about brainstorming as is traditionally done is not really helpful because you're all shouting out ideas and you're kind of drowning each other out, et cetera. And the loudest voice tends to be the one that's heard. And he's like, what if we do brainstorming a different way? What if we all do our idea generation individually and then we come together and we talk them through and you can cluster or whatever. But like, I just love the fact that he's thinking these through. Let's challenge. Let's not go back to what was and assume that's the only way to do it. How do we bring things together? We have so much more available to us. You know, those things, those days when you'd have a workshop and you'd all like put stickies up, etc., and then nothing happened because those, oh, you got to keep those. You got to keep those pieces of paper, and like you roll them up and then they go away. Versus, while I don't love Jamboard, I don't think it's that great of a tool. It lives and it's digital, and I could share it. So
Yep.
it's more than, the photograph of the whiteboard.
Yeah. That's excellent. It's an interesting. I appreciate your perspective. It's really interesting to hear, and it's interesting to hear these things kind of come up organically too, where people are, dealing with the new way to work and the future of work and what that looks like, and the you can fixate on the physical space with real estate and what digital things are available, but really what it comes down to are how you're making lives easier for people and improving the processes and how everyone works. So it comes down to the people.
Yes, and it's not that, like, again, but getting back to the productivity, let me go and talk about like planning. We're doing thinking about occupancy planning. So pre-COVID, we'd get in a room in an afternoon and we'd talk about it. And while the person who is the oversight for the whole campus, she would be like, well, we need to think about X, Y, and Z. But the person who is the business alliance would be like, yes, but that doesn't work for this group because, right? Whereas when it happens, she'll still do this high level planning, which is really good. And she's incredibly productive. But she's not able to bring people along in her thinking. So I think this whole idea of like bringing each other along in our thinking and being able to challenge each other in real time, that's what we want to do in person. Actually, I'd say it could also happen virtually with intention. So I think I don't want to default to like you always have to be in person. I always have to be intentional.
Perfect. I think that's That's excellent. Thanks, Sarah. I would get in my last few questions here that are really
Okay.
just about you. So
Cool.
this is a little bit of a quick based tradition that whenever a new person
Okay.
joins the team, we have kind of a standard three questions that we ask,
Okay.
and they are your first car, your first job, and your first concert.
Oh, great. I love the first concert one. So my first car, Hyundai Excel. I turned 21. I drove it for 8 years, and literally I went to go trade it in. It died in the intersection before the dealership. And I got $50 on the trade-in. So first official job was when I was 12. I filed in my father's office. He was a physician. The first job I got on my own, Nathan's Famous Hot Dogs. Um, and first concert, I grew up in New Jersey, so this is going to be not one that many people know, but Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes on New Year's Eve. And the band that opened for them was the Waitresses, and they were amazing. And many people know the Waitresses because
Yeah.
of their Christmas song, Bah Humbug. Yeah, so
Yep.
Christmas rapping, that's what it's called, Christmas rapping. So yeah,
Cool. Cool.
yeah.
I can just on the you say Jumpin' Johnny and not Jumpin' Johnny and the
Southside
Southwest.
Johnny and the Asbury Jukes.
Thank
It's
you.
like a Bruce Springsteen
I
spinoff
was
kind of thing.
I was going to say the name alone. I could tell right off the name alone exactly who inspired that. So we talked about this a little bit. So what have you been reading, watching, listening to recently?
Let's start with listening to, because I have actually been doing a lot more listening than I did before. A friend of mine, one thing is, we're dying to be outside, so lots of walks, and I live in South San Francisco, so we have a great climate. I started listening to Simon Sinek's podcast called A Bit of Optimism, and I love it. I love it so much. I cannot speak highly. I was listening to it this morning, so really, really good. Um, and it's what really resonates with me is he talks a lot about there's a large self-help section in every bookstore. There's not a section about help others, and there should be. So I feel like we need to come together more. And I'm going to segue back into our workplace thing for a second. Um, Working from home versus working in the office is an I versus a we conversation. When I work from home, it's very convenient for me, Sarah, the individual. I can get some laundry done. I can hang out with my dog, who I adore. I can get maybe some, get dinner started early or whatever. But a leader here has talked about, but who didn't learn from you that day? Who did you not learn from? So it's this really, what about we? What about us as a team? What about our community and our connection? So anyway, Simon Sinek has been reinforcing a lot of that for me. And then reading, somebody sent me this book. I just opened it up and I can't remember the title. It is something about like understanding your inner black sheep. Shout out to Simon Davis, who started a group called Purposeful Intent. He's the one who sent it to me. I'm already hooked. And I have not really been watching a lot of things. I do a little bit. My 17-year-old son loves Wes Anderson as a director. So every so often he'll be like, hey, you want to watch, Grand Budapest Hotel or Royal Tenenbaums? So we'll, kind of throw something like that on. But I have not been, and I did suffer through that Niners game yesterday.
It was rough. It was very, very rough. I've got my brother-in-law is a big Eagles fan, and we were
I'm
we were
sorry.
talking we were talking the whole time, and it was funny about the third quarter. He said, "What if they're playing possum? His arm's actually okay, and he's going to start unleashing." And I said, "I don't think that's it, buddy. Yeah, I think you're
Well, I'm a
okay."
New York Giants fan, so like my hopes were dashed, last week.
Yeah, I'm a Ravens fan, so I was just cheering on the Chiefs all night last night.
Ah,
So,
all right. Fun.
well, cool. Sarah, my last thing is anybody that wants to follow your work, where can they find you, and where should they be following along with what you're doing?
Um, I would say I don't do a great job at like putting my work out there. So there's a conference I attend called Workspaces, and they do, it's called, put on by a group called the Influencer Group, and they do it for lots of different industries, retail, senior living, higher ed, etc. I highly recommend it because really good conversations happen there. And I typically will attend that conference. And so, and then the other thing is I mentioned Purposeful Intent. Um, it grew out of workspaces to really promote dialogue in the real estate and workplace world. And Simon Davis is moving that forward. So I'm pretty active. So I'm more of a responder on LinkedIn than a
Sure.
poster.
That's
So
great though.
yeah.
Well, Sarah, this has been a real pleasure. I can't thank you enough for coming on and joining us. And take care.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was really enjoyable. Take care. Bye bye.